Mr. Naidu.
Thank you, Chair. The presentation, Chair, that I saw today was the first time as a board member I was seeing it. I wasn't party to it. So I thought what I should take you and let you know is that if I was party to it, I would have made the following contributions to some of the issues that are pertinent that you raised, and I think some of the honourable members raised earlier. And the first one, very simply, it's around Mr.
Are you saying you didn't contribute to the presentation of the board?
No, we have not somewhere. So all I'm saying is that had I been part of that, I would have informed this committee and you, Chair, about 3 issues coming from a legal perspective, because that's what I am. I'm a lawyer. The first thing, very simply, is the Western Cape judgment. You had a judge saying this appointment was irrational. Stop. Right. So that means at that point, had you not taken a further legal recourse, it would have meant that the incumbent was no longer an employee of the organization. That is the effect of that judgment. But by going on appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal or applying for leave to appeal, what you in effect do, you stay that judgment. That means for that period of time, you are still an employee until the SCA makes a decision. That decision was made a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the SCA said there are no prospects of appeal. Now, at that point, that's the final door, as we call it, you are no longer an employee of this organization. There's no other explanation for this whole thing. So as simple as that. The second point is that the SCA decision has nothing to do with the Motsoneng as an employee. I mean, that is absolute nonsense. I mean, whoever gave the SABC that advice should be shot. The third point is around the delegation of authority. Now, I think whoever is advising the board, it could be our internal legal department, there's a reference to clause 13.8.1 which says that the powers to delegate are given to the chief executive officer in terms of the DAF, delegation of authority framework. Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking of delegation. You know, when you talk about corporate governance, firstly, that's the power given to you. Yes, that means you as the incumbent can make a decision. But the next point is in terms of what framework did you make that decision, in terms of what the exercise of executive authority. Now, there's a famous case that goes back about 15 years in this country called the pharmaceuticals case, which laid down the principle that when you give power to an executive, like a CFO or a CEO or a COO, there is a duty on that incumbent to exercise that authority in a judicious way, with understanding of all the complexities that go in making such a decision, and not in an arbitrary way. So when you exercise power in an arbitrary way, which happened in the case of Mr. Motsoneng being appointed as Chief Executive Corporate Affairs, what I'm saying is that there was no proper procedure followed. And listening to the CEO here where he says, well, somebody gave him advice who said, you know, maybe we should put him back in his previous job. I mean, you know, when I listen to an executive at this level talking in such mundane terms, you know, it actually makes out the case why this board should be dissolved. You know, I mean, you don't have to sit and make an inquiry. Just by listening to the inputs of some of the people that went before me, you are dealing with people that don't really understand what is corporate governance, in my view. And I'm speaking as a board member. You know, it gets frustrating as a non-executive board member when you give advice from time to time at the board level, and then it's either refused or turned away, and one is not sure why. And if I go back to a few incidents in September 2013, one of the tasks from some senior advocate to discount what I was saying. So that's been the dysfunctionality of this board, unfortunately, since that time, you know. And I think the point that we're missing is that there are a couple of elephants in this room, you know, and you know, what we're trying to do here as a board is trying to skirt around those elephants and deal with compliance issues in a very superficial way. And I think that's a bit disingenuous, not just to this committee, but to the South African public and the taxpayer in this country. So that would have been my contribution on those 3 matters pertaining to Mr. Motsoneng. They are very simple issues, so let's not complicate simple matters. The second thing, Chair, is that we've had the Public Protector report now since, I think, February 2014. And it's very clear that those were binding judgments, and had you had a different opinion, the only legal alternative was to go and review to a court of law. So a court of law had to set aside those findings. And I think the unfortunate part in the SABC was that we've had a kind of long process in order to undermine what was said by the public protector. And I thought that was legally wrong. And I've just heard from my colleague here that we are now going to go 3 years to a court of law. I want to review something in 2013. You must have a good case to make out to judges. They're not going to listen to you and wait for you to come after the event. So let's be mindful of that process. And I just want to end by saying, Chair, that I've heard all the explanations and I'm not satisfied as a board member. When I look at this presentation, it was amateurish, in my view. So I think my own position is this, and I want to take my cue from Honorable Shabambu when he said earlier in his input, what are we doing here? Some of us have come through some serious struggles to bring this country to the point where we'd like to give a better life for everyone. And here we are sitting discussing and spending valuable time discussing mundane issues, I've come to the conclusion that this board is dysfunctional. It should be scrapped. And personally, I will be resigning today as a board member. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I just want to touch on a few points which I believe are very crucial that require attention. There was a point mentioned here that this board dismissed a number of board members in a manner that was quite unusual. I must make it a point here and now that it's something that really pains me because I was against that decision. And it is said that we speak about the late Hope Zinde, who was one of those members. And very credible auditors, if I may use the word, Ronnie Lubisi and Rachel Kalidas, who added value into the audit committee to a very large degree. And I'm actually at pains to say, I'm wondering what is happening as we're seated here. The second point I thought I should raise is with respect to the kind of dysfunctionality that has come to the fore. And indeed, by the way, the presentation that was presented this afternoon or this morning, I was seeing it for the first time too. I was not party to it. I was completely flummoxed when I saw that. And I said, what is happening? So there seems to be some kind of isolationist approach to ostracize certain board members for whatever reason I may not know. But what is crucial here is that I do believe that I made it my point because I had the public interest at heart to ensure that the public corporation does its work accordingly. But of course, in certain or in most instances, things have to come to a hit whereby we have to vote on issues, and more often than not, we never agreed. But what is important, Chairperson, is that some of the processes that one has observed really leave much to be desired. I'll just give a few examples. To date, we have no fewer than 11 executives having been offered severance packages for whatever reason, and these have never been brought to the attention of the board because I heard about them through the grapevines. And my worry here, Chair, is that it's nothing short of institutional genocide. Because you have people who have got institutional memory who have been ostracized or taken out of the institution for whatever reason, and for me that is very worrying. I'm worried to say what is going to remain now that they are gone. You're going to have musical chairs because the executives will then do whatever they do and appoint people from within. Whether that is going to be credible or not is another matter. And that for me is quite worrying. I heard about it today. I was not party to that recommendation that went to the minister for her to be able to give ratification to that. Because ordinarily they would have a round robin to ensure that each one of us expresses a view or an opinion. I don't have anything against her. I'm merely indicating a process point that says that we're not following due process, and seemingly it's very clear that a particular picture is beginning to emerge, and it's actually worrying me. I cannot afford to be party to that. And for that reason, Chair, I believe that seemingly my contributions are not adding much value, and it's more the reason why I've come to the conclusion that I'm tendering my resignation today.